Thank you for turning to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at some information out of one of my favorite traveler supplements of all time, the Third Imperium. I picked this guy up on ebook about a year ago and have loved it since. I keep finding new things in here that I just love. This is a great source book. I took a look at it about a year ago. If you haven't seen it, that video is sometime early December last year. But I want to take a look at law and layers of law, not law level, but different types of law you might find yourself under in Traveler. So just a quick look at the different types of law, again, not law level. And my source material will be coming from the Third Imperium book. Also, just subscribers, hey, come on in. Channel's growing like crazy. I want to keep it growing like crazy. Thank you, subscribers who have subscribed. Patrons, thank you very much. I have a reward up on Patreon. Go ahead and take a look at that. End of commercial. Back to today's topic, which is going to be layers of law in Traveler. All right, working out of Traveler, the Third Imperium from Mongoose from about a year ago. I still think Emperor Strephon looks a lot like Doctor Strange in that cloak. And Doctor Strange could time travel, so I'm just saying. So we're going to take a look on page 8. And page 8 of this very nifty book goes into law. Now, this is not to be confused with law level. Law level, of course, is the individual law on a planet that you're on, that kind of thing. These are what I'm calling layers of law, or there are 3 types of law in Imperial space. And there's an important distinction, and it's one that players and game masters really need to be aware of. One is planetary law. That would be where your law level comes from. Each world is empowered to author its own laws that establish everything from the enforcement of petty infractions to high crimes like murder, kidnapping, extortion, and theft. So that's the one when you step out of the starship and walk out of the starport Imperial space and you cross the extrality line, bam, you're under local law. That would be planetary law. And it could even go down as narrow as the law of the actual town you're in or district of the planet if the planet is balkanized. Then you have subsector law. The primary purpose of subsector law is to ensure that star systems do not exert undue oppression or cruelty upon one another. Due to an extensive degree, star systems are allowed to influence and control each other, but when it impedes economic growth, threatens trade, or opposes the interest of the Imperium, subsector level authorities may intervene. What this really means is that the subsector itself, the various planets in there, can kind of get along however they want. The Imperium doesn't really care. They care if it interrupts trade or if it's really oppressing another polity in the same star system with excessive cruelty and oppression, or if it interferes with the interests of the Imperium. An example of interfering with the interests of the Imperium could be maybe the Imperium wants to put a star base, and the local system says, no, I don't think you're going to do that. We don't want you to. But this system is in the Imperium. Well, the Imperium can simply say, we're going to ignore your law. We want an Imperial base here for reasons, so we're going to put it there. That's where the Imperium is overarching. And then the third layer of law, is Imperial law. Crimes such as treason, revolt, tax evasion, and undue violence between worlds using weapons of mass destruction invokes Imperial law, enforced by Imperial military forces. Now, Imperial law, as it goes on to say, few Imperial laws are codified, with most left deliberately vague. This gives the Imperial authorities on the spot a lot of latitude as far as dealing with in each individual situation. You don't want to establish a precedent where you only interfere if nukes are used, but maybe they're using types of gas on populaces or civilian populaces, and you say, well, the precedent has been set, it has to be a nuke. No, the Imperial law stays nice and loose. So the Imperium can come in and intervene pretty much at their whim, and they can use whatever law they want to back up what they want. So it goes on to say there's significant gray area in Imperial law when it comes to the rules of war. Simply put, the Imperium allows belligerent forces to engage in war with one another, provided they don't break the immutable Imperial laws. Free trade is not impeded, and undue cruelty or oppression is not inflicted on one side or the other. Basically, what that means is, again, if you start using nukes, that messes things up. That makes things dirty. That looks bad for the Imperium. So the Imperium is going to step in. And these law levels all matter in imperial space. I just call them law levels. These layers of law all matter in imperial space. They do not necessarily apply outside of imperial space. I'll get into that in just a moment. So the Imperium, if you have one nation that's using weapons of mass destruction on another nation on the same planet, the Imperium can step in and they can say, okay, we're going to back up this guy. And now you go ahead and you roll over your opponent. Now you're our puppet. Sorry, you're our ruler of choice on this planet. You're going to go ahead and be the big guy. That's great if you happen to be the guy. If you're the guy on the other side of the stick, the Imperium is going to roll over you, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it. The Imperium can choose which side it wants to back up, or neither side. The Imperium can simply come in and say, guess what? You guys have just decided to broker a peace. Neither side is going to want to provoke the Imperium and make them land troops there. So they're going to say, okay, we've just decided to broker a treaty. Now, the other thing the Imperium might do is just let the war find its own way. This may be disruptive in the short term, but it's viewed as better than having a long-term guerrilla type situation where the Imperium would have to waste resources and troops being on a planet they really don't care about, quelling some kind of fomenting rebellion or growing rebellion. The war itself can be nasty, but as long as it's not too destructive, the Imperium's going to turn a blind eye to it. War can sometimes just kind of speed the whole process along, according to Imperial thinking, and it's better to just kind of rip the Band-Aid off with a big war than have it fester for 30, 40 years as some kind of underground revolt type situation. This is important to note that this pertains to being inside the Imperium. After all, this book is called The Third Imperium. Outside of the Imperium, what happens then? Well, that's going to matter a lot on where you are outside. If I'm on a fringe of the Imperium and I board a Starliner and I'm going to take a 2-parsec jump to view some magnificent waterfalls of Kapawabi or whatever the site is that I'm going to as a tourist, what matters then is what's the flag of the ship I'm boarding? Is it an Imperial vessel? If that's the case, the Imperial vessel will travel and almost all cases have Imperial law completely aboard the vessel and be protected by Imperial law. Anybody that wants to mess with that ship has to be aware that they're messing directly with the Imperium. But if that ship that I'm boarding is flagged outside the Imperium for whatever reason, then when I board the ship, I might be under their local law. And this could even be a balkanized, a law of a balkanized planet. So I could find myself under these kind of odd laws that I really didn't anticipate simply because I stepped on their ship. And this can apply to anything as small as like a far trader. If you sign up with them, check the registry, see where it's out of. Make sure that the laws you're operating under are laws that you want to operate under. Tourism in the real world, you got to be aware of where you're headed and what you're headed to do and where you're going. It's really not up to anybody but you to find out if where you're headed is actually safe, place you want to go. So the same kind of thing pertains here. So the starship itself can carry Imperial law outside the Imperial borders to a limited degree. This would be a pleasure craft or any kind of Imperial Navy craft, any kind of scout ship. All of those would operate under the umbrella of the Imperium, and you'd be kind of a fool to mess with any of the above. Now, if I'm outside the Imperium, I'm going to take a look at the law a little differently. Planetary law is going to be very important, but the thing I'm really going to worry about is subsector law. Because as I'm in the subsector and they've got the patrol boats, the system defense boats cruising around, they're going to be enforcing subsector law. And, it could be subsector law. My free trader is not allowed to have a laser on it. I might be violating the law just being in their space with a laser on my free trader. You don't know. You've got to check the law where you're headed. So this can build a lot into a traveler game. If you don't want a traveler game where there's a lot of combat, one of the ways you can keep combat from happening is simply to put the players under a law where they really don't want to start any kind of fighting. And then you can have layers of the bureaucracy and you can have them having to deal with the bureaucracy. And you can get yourself a nice role-playing game as opposed to any kind of action-oriented game. The Imperial law The Imperium itself works a lot like the federal government in the United States. The federal government has jurisdiction over the whole country as far as crossing state lines and a lot of other things. And I'm stating very, very plain things. This is not the entire level of the federal jurisdiction. But then when it comes to individual states, each individual state can make their own laws as long as the state's law is not in direct violation with the federal law. And I'm sure that that's one of the reasons this was chosen, since Traveler was written in the United States back in the late 70s. I'm sure that that's one of the reasons this form of law was chosen for the Imperium. So it works a lot like the United States federal law works. So that's the Imperial Law. Imperial law can be very impersonal, very cold. Just because the Imperium is involved doesn't mean that the good guys are winning. The Imperium is not often the good guy. Very often they're the bad guys in the scenario, with good reason. So again, you've got to be careful. But if you're boarding that cruise liner and you're going to take that magical vacation and you're leaving the Imperial borders, you want to check the registry of the ship to be sure you know whose law you're going to be flying under. Also, if you're staying within the Imperium and you debark on the planet, you want to be sure that you're not going to run foul of the planetary law. There's just all kinds of fun little good laws out there. A book I'll be reviewing, or have reviewed, depending on when this one airs, Outlaw for Independence Games. They have planets where sugar has been outlawed as being something bad for the populace, and other planets where caffeine has been outlawed. So you could just smuggle stuff. But I'll go into that more when I take a look at that book. But that's really what I'm looking at today on the layers of law and the layers that can trip you up as a player. The GM can kind of write the scenario where you think you're under one set of laws, but really you're under another. So they can mess with you a lot that way. Good GMs are really going to take a lot of time to consider the law, not just the law level of the planet, but the law that they're dealing with wherever they are in the universe. So that's all I've got to say today for page 121. Let me know your thoughts, any positive comment or positive criticisms. I'm always interested in. And any other thoughts or anything, otherwise like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time on page 121.